So the first thing we need to do when we factorize is look at what is common between them. So if we're looking at this 8x and the minus 20, hopefully we can see that the highest common factor of them both is 4. And it's only going to go into one bracket because we can take something out of both. So what do we times 4 by to get to 8x? Well, it must be 2x. And then what do we times 4 by to get to minus 20? So that would be minus 5. One bracket because something common goes into both. So the first thing we need to see is what goes into both of these numbers, so 10 and 15. And hopefully we can see that the number is 5. Then we need to look if we can take any x's. Well, we've got 2 x's here, but only 1 here, so we can only take 1 out. And we can't take any y's out because there's no y's in that term. So that's the outside of our bracket complete. And then we can start on the inside. So what do we times 5 by to get to 10? Well, it's 2. And we need to times it by 1 more x to get the x squared. Then we've got a minus, remember, because the minus is there and that carries on. Then it's a 3. We've already taken that x, so we've just got 1 y left to put. So again, we need to factorize this expression. So we're going to put it into one bracket again because there's only 2 terms. So what can we take out? Well, we can take a 3 out. Hopefully we can see that 3 goes into both this and this. Therefore, what's left from this when we've taken that 3 out? Well, it's just an x. And what do we times 3 by to get to 12? It has to be plus 4. So factorize fully that. Again, it's only going to be one bracket because we can take something out of both terms. Now we're going to look at our numbers first. So the highest number we can take out is a 2 because we've only got 2 here and we've got a 4 here. So we just take a 2 out. Then we can only take 1x out because we only have 1x here. And we can't take any y's because we don't have a y here. So the outside of our bracket is just 2x. And now we need to fill the inside out. So what do we times 2x by to get to 2x squared? Well, it's just x. And to get to 4xy minus 4xy, it must be 2y. One bracket. Then we need to look at our numbers. So we've got an 8 there and a 4 there. So the only number we can take out is a 4. Remember to leave yourself a lot of space because we're going to put letters as well. So then we've got an x squared and only 1x here. So therefore we can only take 1x out. And we cannot take any y's because we don't have a y here. So therefore now we go at the inside of our bracket. So what do we times 4 by to get to 8? Well, it's 2. We've only got 1x here, but we need 2. So we must times it by another x. And then we look at this 4xy. Well, we've already taken that 4 because we've got it here. We've already taken that x because it's here. So therefore we must just have to times that by plus y. Remember? One bracket because there's only 2 terms. We need to see what's common between them both. Well, hopefully we can see that in both of them there is an x, so x goes on the outside. Then we need to think about what we times x by to get x squared. Now remember, x squared means x times x. Therefore, inside our bracket we must have another x. Then we need to think what we times it by to get plus 7x. So it must just be plus 7. So again, one bracket because there's only 2 terms and something goes into both. Well, what is that something? Well, first we look at numbers. So we get a 2. And then we think, can we take any y's out? Well, yes, we can, but we can only take one y out because there's only one y there. So now we think about what we put inside. Well, again, it must just be another y because here we've got y squared, but we've already got one y. So it's just one y goes inside, and then this must be minus 2. First thing we need to do, remember, one bracket because there's only 2 terms. Then we need to think about what numbers we can take out. Well, we've got an 8 and we've got a 24. So our highest common factor is 8. Then we need to think about any letters. Well, we can't take an x out because there is no x here. The only thing we can take out is one y. So the final thing to think about is what we do to 8y to get to both these terms. So to get from 8y to 8y squared, we times by a y. And then to get to minus 24xy, our number is 3. We need another x, but we don't need another y because it's already there. So this first one then, remember when we factorize, this one is going to go into 2 brackets because unlike the other video, there's nothing common between them. P is going to go at the beginning because it's p squared. So now we need to find 2 numbers that times to get positive 8 and add to get minus 6. So therefore, if they times to get a positive but add to get a negative, we know they both must be negative because otherwise you cannot get a positive when timesing. So the 2 numbers that times to get 8 and add to get minus 6, well, if we work through all the numbers, you'll eventually find that it must be minus 2 and minus 4. 2 and minus 4. Part E then, again, must be 2 brackets because there's nothing common that goes into all of them. Again, just like the one before, times to get positive 5, add to get a minus 6. So therefore, again, must be P at the beginning. And our numbers must both be minuses to get a positive when timesing. So again, we can look at numbers that times to get 5. Well, 5 is a prime number, so the only option is 1 and 5, and we know that must be right because that adds to get minus 6. Again, double brackets because there's nothing common between these 3 terms. Again, 2 numbers times to get positive 18 and add to get minus 11. So therefore, x must go at the beginning to get x squared. Both our numbers again have to be negative because there's no other way to get positive when timesing and a negative when adding. So then we look through our options and we think, well, it could be 6, minus 6 and minus 3, but they will not add to give minus 11. So we think of another option, minus 9 and minus 2. Yes, they times to get 18. Do they add to get minus 11? Well, yes, they do. So it must be those. So question 6b, again, must be 2 brackets. Y must go at the beginning because we've got this y squared. So hopefully we're seeing a pattern. These are very similar. You just need to get used to working with them. So again, times to get our last term. Add to get the y term. So we add to get minus 10 times to get positive 16. Again, both must be negative because otherwise we can't get a positive when timesing. So if we run through the options, we are going to find that it's going to be minus 8 and minus 2, because that's the only way we can get minus 10 there. Because there's 3 terms and nothing common. X goes at the beginning because it's x squared. And then we need to find 2 numbers. This time they times to get negative 10 and they add to get negative 3. So we know one must be a positive and one must be a negative. Otherwise we cannot get a negative when timesing. So 2 numbers, we can hopefully see that it's going to be 2 and 5, but we just need to work out which one is going to be the positive and which one is going to be the negative. Well, our 2 options are when it's positive 2, take away 5, or minus 2, add 5. Well, if we work out the answer to both of those, we get that. We know we have to have minus 3, so it must be this option here. So our 2 goes there and our 5 goes there. Again, double brackets because there's nothing common between these 3 terms. Again, 2 numbers, times to get positive 18 and add to get minus 11. So therefore, x must go at the beginning to get x squared. Both our numbers again have to be negative because there's no other way to get positive when timesing and a negative when adding. So then we look through our options and we think, well, it could be 6, minus 6 and minus 3, but they will not add to give minus 11. So we think of another option, minus 9 and minus 2. Yes, they times to get 18. Do they add to get minus 11? Well, yes, they do. So it must be those, because there's 3 terms and nothing common. X goes at the beginning because it's x squared. And then we need to find 2 numbers. This time they times to get negative 10 and they add to get negative 3. So we know one must be a positive and one must be a negative. Otherwise we cannot get a negative when timesing. So 2 numbers, we can hopefully see that it's going to be 2 and 5, but we just need to work out which one is going to be the positive and which one is going to be the negative. Well, our 2 options are when it's positive 2, take away 5, or minus 2, add 5. Well, if we work out the answer to both of those, we get that. We know we have to have minus 3, so it must be this option here. So our 2 goes there and our 5 goes there. Notice we now have a coefficient in front of that x squared. So the first thing we're going to do is draw out a grid that looks like this. In this box here, we write the 4x squared, and in that box we write just the 12. So the other 2 boxes are occupied, so this box and this box are occupied using that minus 19x. So what we must do is we do 4 times 12. So this first term times this last term, which gives us 48. Remember, that's a positive 48. So we now find 2 numbers just like before, but now they times to get 48 and they add to get minus 19. So hopefully we can see that because they're times to get a positive and add to get a negative, they must both be negative. And hopefully we'll find that it's minus 16x and minus 3x. So now what we do is along these columns, we then factorize. So if we factorize this one, we get 4x on the outside and x minus 4 on the inside. And then we do exactly the same for this bottom section. So what we're going to get is we're going to get minus 3. then we've got x minus 4. If you're unsure of those factorising ones, just go back to my previous videos. And then hopefully we can see that, look, our bracket is the same. If that's the case, you've got the question right. And then what we do is to form our other bracket, we just take these terms in front, we put them into their own bracket, and we take this bracket and put that as our second, and that is your factorised form. So again, another non-x squared coefficient. So what we're going to do is draw this grid, and we're going to put this term in the first box and this term in this box. And remember to find what these two boxes add to. We do 2 times minus 6 to give us minus 12. Therefore, these two numbers have to times to get minus 12 and add to get positive 1, because remember, if there's no coefficient, it's actually a 1. So these two boxes have to times to get minus 12 and add to get 1. Therefore, our numbers, one must be a positive, the other must be a negative. And hopefully we can see that our numbers are going to be positive 4 and minus 3. Again, if you're unsure of that, check back to the other videos. They go over it in more detail. So now our next step is to factorize along our columns. Sorry, I forgot to put the x's on the end. And now we factorize along. So we get 2x on the outside, x plus 2. And then for this one, we get minus 3, x plus 2. Again, we can see we've got the same bracket. So our final format, or our final answer, is 2x minus 3, x plus 2. So again, when we've got a non-x squared coefficient, we're going to draw our box. Our first term goes in the first box, and our last term goes in the last box. We then do 4 times 9, which gives us 36. Therefore, we know that this box and this box have to times to get 36 and add to get minus 15. So again, we know they're both going to be minus numbers, and hopefully we can see that they're going to be minus 3 and minus 12x. Now, it doesn't matter which way round you put these numbers. Either way will be fine. So our next step, remember, is to factorize top and bottom. So we're going to get 4x on the outside and x minus 3 on the inside. And this bottom one, we're going to get minus 3 on the outside and then x minus 3 on the inside. Again, checking to make sure that those brackets are the same. So our final step is to write out our fully factorized form, which is that bracket, and then we put these together to make our other bracket. So again, we're going to have to draw one of these grids because we've got a non-x squared coefficient. So remember that first term goes in there and our last term goes down here. And remember, we then do those two numbers multiplied by each other to give us 12. Now that becomes our new number, which we times to get and we add to get 7. So two numbers that times to get 12 and add to get 7, well, it must be 4 and 3. So we put those in our grid, each with an x after. And we then factorize along our grid, so we get that 4x, x plus 1, and we're going to get 3 lots of x plus 1. Now remember, we're always looking to make sure those brackets are the same. If they're not, something's gone wrong. So then our final step is to put that together. So our first bracket is x plus 1, which is the bracket we've got twice. And then our second one is a mixture of those. So it's 4x plus 3, because remember the small sign in front of there is a plus. So our final one then, again we're going to have to draw a grid because it's a non-x squared coefficient. So remember, we put this first term in this first box, and we put this last term in this last box. We then do the first term times the last term to give us 60. And we now find two numbers that times to get 60 and add to get 19x, which hopefully we're going to see is 4x and 15x, because 4 plus 15 is 19, 4 times 15 is 60. So our next step then is to factorize along. And if we factorize it, we get that for our first line, and then for our second line we get, again remember we must check those brackets are the same. If they're not the same, something has gone wrong. So that bracket becomes our first bracket of our answer, and our other bracket, remember we mix these together, so it's going to be 2x plus 5.